the son of a cult leader, gun-themed worship services, and some strong family drama. The World Peace Unification Sanctuary has drawn attention from people all over the world, and it's not exactly for all the best reasons. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to my show, Culty. It's the show where I drink tea with you and we talk about cults. It's also the show where I can't keep the intro consistent because I can't keep all of my notes in order. My name is Mayfield, and today we'll be talking about the World Peace Unification Sanctuary, headquartered in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania. This cult is actually an offshoot of another cult that we spoke about last week called the Unification Church. I'll link that video up above for you, and I really do recommend watching it because I think details about that cult will help you understand this cult just a little bit better. Before we get started, I need to make a disclaimer that this video is for educational purposes. The beliefs of this cult are also not my own, and I don't mean to insult anyone that I speak about. Also, I'm not an expert on cults, I just like talking about them. And please don't join a cult, even if it sounds fun. As usual, here's a shot of my outfit for today. My dress is from Taobao, and the rest of my outfit is off-brand. I wanted to be comfortable today, and I actually feel like I ended up looking like Christmas, or German maybe. Wasn't the intent, but hey, I'm comfortable. Now that all of that's out of the way, I'll pour the tea and we can get into it. Okay, let's go. Hyungjin Moon, also known as Shawn, is the 42-year-old leader of the World Peace Unification Sanctuary, along with his wife, Yeon Moon, who's also known as Lee. Throughout this video, I'm going to refer to them as both Lee and Shawn because those are the names I see them called most in the media, so I'm assuming that's what they prefer. It does seem like Shawn is more in charge of the whole church operation than his wife, so we'll really be concentrating on him. First, let's talk about his origins. Shawn's father, Sungmyung Moon, is well known for being the leader of the Unification Church, a cult started in Korea in the mid-1900s after World War II. He and his wife, Hak Ja-han, were the leaders of this group and acted as the cult members' true parents. So throughout the Unification Church's lifespan, Moon had multiple children and he moved to the United States with his family. Shawn is the youngest son and he was born in Tarrytown, New York. He attended good schools growing up and it seems like he had a pretty comprehensive education. So you may be wondering, how did we get from cult leader's son to actual cult leader? Apparently, back in 2008, 88-year-old Sungmyung Moon actually appointed Shawn to be the international president of the Unification Church. And about a year later, they also held a coronation ceremony for this as well. Shawn and members of his church believe that this coronation ceremony makes him Moon's rightful heir and successor. After this coronation, around 2014, Shawn starts to get a lot of his own ideas for the church. He was introducing a lot of new practices to the church, one of them being described as spiritual hand movements, which he seemingly borrowed from Buddhism because he did study Buddhism for a while. He also apparently spent some time in a Catholic monastery, so it seems like he has a lot of backup information on other religions and practices. So Shawn taking the liberty to come up with all of these new ideas and also his supposed coronation as Moon's successor causes a rift within the Unification Church. It caused tension between Shawn and his mother, Hak Ja-han, because she believed she was still the rightful leader of the Unification Church. She had actually been changing the church's doctrine to elevate herself within the church so that she could remain in power, and Shawn didn't really like that very much. Shawn's mother takes this opportunity while she is still in power to demote Shawn slowly throughout the church and kind of give him different positions until she kicks him out entirely. She even replaces his position in the church with one of his brothers. After Shawn is kicked out, a lot of the changes that he made, with the hand movements and all, were removed from the church doctrine entirely. And the Unification Church now officially considers Shawn's group as an offshoot of the main church. And as usual, whenever there's like a tiff in a cult about who's the new leader, a lot of people split in the cult, and some people went with Shawn and some people stayed with Hak Ja-han. Shawn and members of his church now criticize his mother openly because they believe that she was changing the church's doctrine to keep herself elevated above everyone else when Shawn feels like he had the right to be the leader. They also call her the Whore of Babylon, which I feel like is a little aggressive, but I guess that's the point. And they also say that she is no longer the true mother. Shawn also began teaching his cult that the true mother was actually a woman named Hyun Shil Kong, one of Moon's first disciples, saying that Moon had married her spiritually somehow. So now that we have this whole family power struggle drama out in the open, let's talk about the World Peace Unification Sanctuary and its beliefs. This cult actually borrows most of its beliefs from the other cult that it came from. They believe that humanity needs to be purified, and this can only be done in a ceremony conducted by the second king and the second queen, or in this case, Shawn and his wife Lee. They're referred to as the second queen and king because they still believe that Sungmyung Moon and Hyun Shil Kong are the first queen and king. Shawn also believes that he is the cult's true successor and that he's part of a holy bloodline. They also seem to be very concerned with the idea of getting God's kingdom to be here on earth because of the Bible Bible verse that says, "On earth as it is in heaven." A noted difference between this cult and the old cult is that Shawn claims that he had a holy revelation in which he realized the biblical rod of iron mentioned in the book of Revelations is actually an AR-15, like a rifle. I don't really know how he got to this realization, but that's what he said. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe I found an interview with one of Shawn's brothers who said that Shawn always had an interest in guns, so it's likely that Shawn is just marrying his two hobbies. But whatever the reason really is, because of this Bible verse, Shawn and his followers believe that it's their God-given, holy, divine right to own guns. Shawn has managed to integrate guns into every ceremony in the church, whether it's for weddings or everyday services. The cult believes that they are going to be the ones to judge the wicked with their AR-15s, the wicked being whoever they feel like might harm them, and they feel as though that this will bring heaven down to earth, creating a holy kingdom for themselves. And you guys can see how that's dangerous, right? Like, we can't just have people running around judging people freely based on their morals and values. Like, no one person is completely just and correct all the time, you know what I mean? The followers believe that they are all kings and queens and that they have the holy right to defend their territory, which I'm assuming is like their homes or their land or their families. In all of the interviews I watched of the cult's members, they all seem to be extremely concerned about being attacked or robbed or harmed in some way. Like, of course, being cautious is important, but it does seem to be airing into the territory of extreme paranoia, which seems to be cultivated within this group. Shawn tells them that people are going to harm them because they're believers, and because to them they are Christians that hold the true faith, this makes them targets. So all of this does sound overly cautious to us, but think with me for a minute here. Imagine, if you were a member of this group, what if you had had a home invasion happen to you at some point in the past? What if you had been attacked and you couldn't protect yourself? A cult with beliefs like this would make a lot of sense to someone who's been harmed in this way. So I can see how joining this group would make someone feel like they're in a lot more control in their lives after such a traumatic event. Another defining feature of this cult is that they're notably right-wing and they're super into the Second Amendment, which is the right to bear arms. They ascribe to a lot of right-wing political ideologies, and in the last presidential election they supported candidate Donald Trump because they believed that he would be the one to get them closer to God's kingdom. They also insinuate that receiving a higher education, such as going to college or university, will make you become a political leftist, thus supporting the devil's agenda, which I don't feel is fair because both Shawn and his father went to college. Their parent cult, the Unification Church, is also fairly right-wing, so none of this is very surprising. The World Peace Unification Sanctuary is still a fairly small group, so aligning yourself with political ideologies like that is a really good way to get new members and find social acceptance. Shawn and his wife Lee and his brother actually all attended the insurrection that took place at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. this past January. And also on January 3rd, before the insurrection, the cult actually sent out a notice to its members which read, "Some federal agents operate as a criminal cartel and are in the process of stealing this presidential election. We need to prepare and train for the fight." Shawn actually does a podcast-style broadcast in which he talks about socialism and communism being the devil's politics, and how he believes right-wing ideals will bring us closer to God's kingdom. While I didn't listen to too much of these broadcasts myself, I can say that what I did hear about certain political ideologies was factually incorrect. Like, of course, there's a lot of opinions and heavy religious overtones in these broadcasts, but when it comes to the actual facts that he's stating, it's just not accurate. He also often says that true political power should be given only to the true kings and queens of Christ, by which he means the cult's members. A lot of what Shawn preaches to his members is an us versus them philosophy which will make them feel persecuted enough to stick around. It also seems like the cult relates firearms directly to holiness. They never call them guns, they just call them rods of iron. The cult is also partnered with some gun stores, many of them being owned by Shawn's older brother Justin. Justin is an assistant pastor at the church and he also owns a gun manufacturer called Car Arms. So you may have heard of this cult for the first time back around sometime in 2018 when they first held a ceremony that was well reported on in the media. The group was widely criticized for bringing AR-15s into a ceremony called a commitment ceremony. For this ceremony, the members were required to wear white dresses, tuxedos, and crowns, and they were all instructed to also bring their AR-15s, and I think it actually might have been required if I'm remembering correctly. Once again, I'm going to be reading my notes for this because it's a little long. But at this ceremony, Shawn prayed for a kingdom of peace police and peace militia, where the citizens, through the right given to them by the Almighty God to keep and bear arms, will be able to protect one another and protect human flourishing. This drew a lot of criticism, and there were even protesters outside of their property, because just before this, the Parkland shooting had taken place in Florida where 17 people died. Protests for gun reform broke out across the country, people having been angered at the lack of action after the shooting. Needless to say, this AR15 ceremony they had didn't really go over very well. This was a horrible time to have an event like this. In response to all of the criticism, the cult said that they had actually been planning this ceremony for months and that they never planned for it to be like a public statement or a threat. Regardless of what their intention was, it definitely made an impression. The school nearby the cult's property actually canceled classes for the day when they saw all of those people walking into the ceremony with a bunch of AR-15s. The police were called to monitor the situation, but they quickly discovered that the members' guns were not loaded and that they had actually been peace bonded at the door. But it's not like the neighboring community knew that. Couldn't they have given them a heads up or something? So after this, the cult probably felt like they were getting a little too much negative attention, so what do? They buy up 40 acres out here in Texas. They bought a compound in a rural area of Texas outside of Waco called Thornton, Texas. The cult has stated that they're hoping this compound will be a safe place for patriots from what they believe is an imminent war brought upon by the deep state or something, which is a very concerning thing to hear coming from them, because the more likely they perceive that there's a threat, the more likely they're going to act out. I don't know if you guys remember the last time there was a cult near Waco, but it didn't exactly turn out too well, but that's another story for another time. Apparently, they've also expanded to Florida and Delaware, and Shawn's teachings have become increasingly militaristic. His recent sermons have mentioned everything from why he hates ski resorts. He said it was because of all the liberals, I guess no one but liberals like skiing, to how to prepare for the oncoming deep state war, saying that people are going to have to fight physically and sacrifice their lives if people continue to ignore their beliefs. I have a quote here from a sermon that Shawn did recently that's very long, so I'm going to paraphrase it a bit, but it is also very telling. The internationalist Marxist globalists are trying to start a civil war here so that they can bring the United Nations troops and Chinese military to come in and destroy and kill all gun owners, as well as Christians and Trump supporters. We are in the death of America right now, and that's why, of course, God is allowing for our expansion. So the thing about cults is that they tend to change very quickly. Mainstream religions tend to change throughout history to suit society at the time, but cults can change their ideologies, their entire doctrines from one year to the next. And that's why people are so concerned that this cult may become very dangerous in the future. They're already saying things that are of great concern. Even if we did not call this group a cult, they're extremely isolated in rural areas, saying that the world needs to be remade in some way. Pairing all of these things with their strong opinions, historically, this does not tend to pan out very well. Hopefully this group will chill out a little bit more in the future, but I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. So what did you guys think of this group? I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I feel like there was much to unpack this time. Please hit like and subscribe. I'm still just a new YouTuber, so it really helps me out a lot. I'll see you again next week. Okay guys, bye! Before we get started, I need to make a disclaimer that these cicadas are screaming. It's that brood X I've been hearing about.